Today's guest is writer and author Harrison Scott Key. We're talking about his latest book, which came out earlier this year, How to Stay Married. And basically, our conversation revolves around that idea. How exactly do we stay married? Harrison gives us insight into his own story, which is, of course, written into this book, what this book is all about. It is both hilarious and heartbreaking. We talk a lot about what forgiveness looks like and what marriage looks like, how it's not what we so commonly think it is, how it's not very easy, and yet how it's worth it all the same. This is Outside Ourselves. I'm Kelsi Climbera. Here's today's episode. Harrison, thank you so much for being here today. Welcome to Outside Ourselves. Good to see you, and I'm excited to chat.
I'm so happy to get outside myself with you today.
Well, I would love if you want to just start. I always have guests start this way by just telling us a little bit about yourselves. That gets me out of doing that job. If you want to tell people who you are and what you do, and then we'll go from there.
Okay. Well, I am so many things, Kelsi. I am mostly a writer. I write mostly funny books. I am a husband and a father of 3 girls who are all teenagers, which is really fun right now. um, and I live in Savannah, Georgia. I work at SCAD, which is a really awesome art and design university here in Savannah, Georgia. And what else do you need to know? I love to mow the lawn, and I'm a great dancer. I'm drinking sparkling water with Welch's grape flavor in it. So it looks
Oh,
like
interesting.
black coffee, but
I've never
it's
heard of that
delicious.
combo before.
Well, I like sparkling water, and my wife got me a Soda Stream for my birthday
Oh, nice.
last year, and I was like, "That is so stupid. Why would I want to make my own? Like, I don't like. You have to have the gas. You have to buy the gas, like the little
Yeah,
canister."
yeah.
But that's because I'm terrible at receiving gifts. I love giving gifts, but I'm terrible at receiving gifts. So it just sat there for a while. And then slowly I started to use it, and now I use it every day. And I'm fine. See, I'm going too long with my answer here, but I got to
It's
tell
fine.
you, the Starburst flavor is my favorite. It's in the
Okay.
water section at the grocery store, like wherever the bottled water is. There's this like section of like Crystal Light and stuff that you
Yeah.
flavor water with. And I'm just a sucker for like grape soda. I mean, I
Interesting.
love it.
All
Like I
right.
am 5 years old again. So the grape flavor and the Starburst flavor are my favorites. Thank you for
I,
asking. I feel
anytime. I mean,
seen.
I will say two things. My husband has tried to get us to buy a Soda Stream, and I've said no like a million times. So the fact that you use it is
Say yes.
that's something.
Say
Um,
yes to the dress, Kelsi. It'll change your life. And we don't have to buy. I don't have to buy like soft drinks anymore. And I don't really.
yeah.
I mean, it's fine. Like, what do you call it? Like Waterloo and LaCroix. All that's fine. But I like artisanal sodas now. That's who I am.
I love it. I'm gonna try the Starburst flavor because I'm
So
um,
good.
8 months pregnant and all I eat basically are Nerds clusters. I don't know if you've ever had those, but they're
Yes,
amazing.
I have. They are
And
amazing.
they remind me a little bit of Starburst. So
Yeah.
thank you for that. Thank you for that intro. Um, you are here today because of your latest book, which is How to Stay Married, and I read it this
Yes.
summer and loved it. And I'm, people have said this. I'm not the first one to say this, but it is probably the most hilarious book I've read on a very difficult topic. Usually when I tell people about it, I'm always like, it's hilarious. But then I start telling them. And I'm like, well, it's also on a very, it's also about a very heartbreaking story. So I'm wondering, A, how you managed to do that, but also if you want to give us a little bit about the book to begin with. I think that would be helpful for people.
Okay. Well, I'll answer the second question first. So, this book is it's on the surface, it's a book about marriage. It's called How to Stay Married, the most insane love story ever told. Which, for anybody who has an issue with it, that title is obviously hyperbole, to describe your own love story as being the most insane. That's how it often feels to most people. My first book was called The World's Largest Man, and it's about my dad. And he is not, in fact, the largest man in the world. But some interviewers were like, "So, how big is your dad?" I'm like, that is not at all the point of that title. And so, yeah, that's the subtitle is a big exaggeration on this new book. So ostensibly, it's about marriage. The sort of setup of the story is my wife asks for a divorce, and when I ask why, she tells me that she's in love with a guy who used to live next door to us, which, as you would imagine, kind of melted my brain a little bit.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one, just being asked for a divorce is pretty life changing, especially when you're like, you haven't been like having the most epic fights or something. It kind of came as a blindside. And then to
Yeah.
find out who it was just added to it. And so the book is, in a way, kind of a true crime memoir where I am trying to figure out who killed my marriage, and is it really dead, and can dead things come back to life?
Hmm.
And so that's really the setup of the book. And those questions compel me to look long and hard in the mirror, and figure out, and to look long and hard at my wife and at her affair and at this neighbor and
Yeah.
at our church and at our life and sort of how we got there and where to go next. But so that's really the book. Um, so in one sense, really depends on your point of view and how you're reading the book. In one sense, it's a spiritual memoir about
Yeah.
because the questions about what to do about my marriage are really, um, I answer those questions by just trying to figure out what love is and what is
Hmm.
forgiveness and what is grace and what is justice and what is mercy. And so those are big, those are huge religious, philosophical, spiritual questions.
Yeah.
And so people are like, I don't know, why did it, some readers are, who are not really into religion are, upset that it would be so much about religion and not just about marriage. But for me, those are kind of inseparable things. It's like trying to write a book about, um, I don't know, trying to write a book about war without exploring what makes people fight in
Yeah.
wars and what
Hmm.
what you know what philosophical dispositions of humankind make them fight. I mean, well, so for me, the question of what is a marriage and is really a question of what is God and what matters most and what is love. Those are all religious questions. But for other
Hmm.
people, this is just a book. It's a funny book about marriage for and for some it is a just a funny book. And so I'll answer your first question now, which is how do you make something like that funny? I think the real question is not like, I didn't start out saying how can I make this book funny.
Yeah.
Comedy is just how I interact with the world. Excuse me. And so, I mean, uh, a, a friend of mine, a poet named Maggie Smith, she just wrote a book about her marriage and her divorce. And it's called You Could Make This Place Beautiful. And she's a poet, and her prose sounds very much like poetry. It's vivid, it's rich in language, it's structured. in a kind of broken, kind of meta narrative way, because that's how she sees the world. And so any
Mm,
book Maggie Smith writes is going to sound like a really beautiful poetic book written by a poet. So any book that
right.
I write is going to be funny, or at least going to come at its topic sort of with a funny point of view.
Yeah.
And now that's obviously a challenge. I mean, I think the short answer would be, because some people like, how can you write about infidelity and religion and God in such a sacrilegious, like flippant way? But for me, comedy is definitely a way to get to the truth, not a way
Yeah.
to avoid it or to sidestep it. And, when I was telling this story to my friends as it was happening, of course, I wasn't laughing when I told them, but after enough conversations, it did become rather funny. The circumstances of my wife's affair and our absolutely terrible way that we were married, and both of
Hmm.
us, not just the affair, but like we were both really bad at being married. Like relaying the circumstances and the situations, it was absurd. I mean, my
Yeah.
wife was in love with the neighbor, and like this guy was like opposite of me in every way. He didn't like to read. He didn't like to discuss movies. As I say in the book, he once told me he would vote for Kid Rock for president. Like, how could you not, like, when somebody's like, like, who's she having the affair with? And I would tell them, it would come out funny, because I'm like, that was the only way to deal with the tragedy of what was happening
Yeah.
without my skull exploding.
Mm,
And so it just, to me, it lent itself naturally to comedy. Now, obviously, you've read the book. It's not all funny. There are a lot of
right.
passages that are heartbreaking, and where you might find yourself crying or
Yeah.
sobbing or scratching your head. But a lot of it is funny. And to me, God is funny,
Yeah.
and religion especially is very funny, because the heart of comedy is paradox and things that don't make sense. And not a lot about God and religion and love and marriage make a lot of sense sometimes.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you write specifically about, you kind of tie in, I think you were reading through the Bible during this time and these years, and you write about the absurdity that you found in the Old Testament, which, depending on the person you're talking to, um, actually Christians and non-Christians both might find that kind of like, what do you mean absurdity and comedy in the Old Testament? Can you talk a little bit about what you found there and how it was helpful to you during this time? Because I think you're so right. There's so much about comedy that is directly related to faith, and unfortunately, Christians a lot of times miss that. They skip over that and get to the serious stuff, I think, way too quickly.
I mean, I mean, that you could write 100 books
Yeah.
on comedy and what people do and don't find funny and why. Um, in my experience, anyone who, I mean, people who take themselves too seriously, uh, do not often find things funny. I mean, like if everybody's laughing at you because you spilled something on your, new shirt at work and you love this shirt, you probably won't be laughing. Like you'll be
Mm,
mad as hell because you love this shirt and everybody's laughing at you. Um, but I don't know. I mean, I guess specifically to get to your question about the Bible, I mean, there's so much weirdness in the Bible, and
yeah.
most Christians either avoid that, unconsciously or not, or they try to sort of explain it away. Um, if you're fighting a war, and so many Christians feel like they are fighting a war with the world and with
Mm,
their colleagues and classmates and friends and neighbors and politically or otherwise, um, it's you don't have time or space for comedy. Comedy requires playfulness and kind of an openness of heart, a recognition that like things sometimes suck and
Yeah.
things don't always go the way you want them to, and that humankind is doesn't make sense all the
Yeah.
time. So anyway, you're reading the Bible. You know, when you're reading it as a kid in Sunday school, um, your Sunday school teachers aren't going to focus on the paradoxes and focus on the strange things. I mean, you know, like I mean, any Christian who has a pair of eyes and reads, you know, can recall all the strange parts of Scripture. But like, you know, when you think about like when you're learning the whether it's in Sunday school or church, um, you know, when you're reading about David and Saul and in Chronicles and Kings and what's that other book? Samuel, yeah.
Samuel, yeah.
When you're reading about, you know, you're reading about sort of the epic of, you know, Saul has power and David is you know, this kid who killed the Goliath and now he's on the run and da da da.
Mhm.
Um, but you know, like the part where, you know, Saul asks him to go like get 10,000 foreskins. Like that is so insane.
Yeah.
And yeah, like of course, you know, like maybe that was normal back then. Like bring me some foreskins, you know, like but
10,000
it's
actually.
yeah, like wow, that's like one would be difficult. 100 would seem
Yeah.
like it would take a lot of organization to do. So like, you know, in the book, I'm not just, you know, talking about the Old Testament just to be silly. And the circumstances in the book are I'm really struggling to figure out what to do with my marriage. And this happened during the pandemic, and things were weird for everybody. Even when they were
Yeah.
good, they were so
Right.
strange, and everything was just kind of turned sideways. And I was a bit adrift, and I knew that my wife had and I at this point in the book, this is like around the just past the halfway mark, maybe 2/3 into the book, and we were approaching sort of the big climax, which at the time I didn't know what that was going to be, but you can find out if you read. But
Mm.
things were very unsettled in my heart, and so I thought, you know, like, and I was trying to understand my wife's affair, and I was reading every novel I could get my hands on, and I was reading books of wisdom. I was reading books about marriage, but I was also reading like tons of novels about broken marriages, infidelity. I read one novel by Elena Ferrante. You know, the woman's husband had an affair, and so she kind of went crazy. And then I read another novel called Fire Sermon by Jamie Quatro. It's a great book about a poet who had an affair with,
Mm.
I think, another poet, and it was really beautiful and kind of magical and terrifying. But I was just trying to understand, like, what was my wife thinking? What did I contribute to this? And so I was reading all these books, and finally I was like, you know what? I'm just going to read the Bible. Like, I'm going to read it. I was so desperate for answers and desperate for clarity, and I read it from start to finish. And I had read the whole Bible before, you know, in those like you know, yearly reading plan
Yeah.
type situations, and had books that I liked and books that I hated. And but I was like, you know what, I'm just going to read this thing start to finish. I had lots more time because it was during the pandemic, and you know, we weren't doing as much during those days. And so I jump into the Old Testament, and the first thing that I see, it's like my eyes had changed because of what had happened in my life, and I was reading this book like a novel. Like,
Mm.
was it true? Sure, maybe. Uh, did this really happen? Let's see. I didn't question veracity. I wasn't trying to decide, like, what is this? I was trying to get at poetic meaning, the
Yeah.
same way you would read a novel or watch a TV show, or, you know,
Yeah.
when everybody watched Barbie, you know, there's so much in that movie that's so fascinating, and it
Yeah.
really compels you to think like about like 100 million things all layered together about gender roles and men and women, and you know, there's that really emotional part near the end where like every person over the age of 20 is crying in the film. And and you're not thinking Barbie's not real. This is there is no Barbie land. You're not thinking that because the story is compelling real truth and
Yeah.
real questions. And so that's how I approach the Bible. I'm like, I'm not worried if it's true or not. I'm not worried about how weird it is or how much sense it makes. I'm just going to see what it says. And so I just, on every page, especially in the Old Testament, you just see, like, the most fascinating thing is just to realize how terrible all the good guys are in the
Yeah,
Bible.
absolutely.
Um, from Adam and Eve to David and Solomon, and just
Hmm.
so many strange people who, like, these are the good guys, and they are so bad. They
So
do.
bad.
I mean, Isaac and Jacob and Joseph, and just, I mean, the fascinating stories. And so I was very, you couldn't deny the comedy. I mean, there's the comedy in the specific parts, like, the foreskins, or, the part where the prophet Elijah is taunting
Yeah.
the prophets of a sex god. Like,
Yeah.
that is so crazy. Like, if this
Yeah.
was in, like, this is crazier than Game of Thrones level stuff.
Oh, for
And
sure. Yeah.
so it felt very encouraging to me to realize that, like, oh wait, like, because my life had felt pretty crazy
Mm.
when I was reading it. It doesn't, like, there was a lot of comfort in realizing that the absurd things that had happened to me in my life were clearly not original to me, and
Hmm.
that this book, that whether you're religious or not, this book represents in one place the most collected human wisdom that exists.
Mm.
And I don't know any literary person who does not understand that the Bible, especially the King James, the Old and New Testament, the impact of this on the human imagination, on the human experience, on how we
Hmm.
communicate, how we understand what people are for. Like, this book is it. And so to know that here was, like, some of humanity's greatest wisdom, whether it's God breathed or whether it's just written by people over the
Hmm.
centuries, that this book was also full of comedy and insanity and absurdity and stuff that made no sense. And yet there was so much healing and mercy and hope in the book, and wisdom. And I found great strength in that. It seemed to describe my life perfectly. Like, um, like knowing that, like, there was a moment in the book where I pull out my wife's suitcase and I say, why don't you go to him? Like, why don't you go be with him, like, and
Hmm.
talk to him about your life? I was like, let me help you pack. I didn't kick her out. I was like, let me help you pack. Like, she didn't even have enough. She was, like, struggling on whether she should leave or not. I'm
Yeah.
like, well, you love this guy. You got to go figure out where all his skeletons are buried before you take your own skeletons over there. So why don't you go talk to him, like, this weekend? Like, that's a strange place to find yourself,
Yeah.
where you're advising your wife as a friend about what she should do about her marriage, which involves you. Like, it's so strange. But
Yeah.
in reading the Bible, you're like, oh no, other people have also been in very, very strange shoes like this over the millennia.
I mean, I think there's so much can come when you approach the Bible honestly, as you're saying, honestly is in the sense of like what it's actually saying and who it's actually describing.
Yes.
Because it allows you, I think, then to be honest about yourself, and people in general, instead of trying to like cut corners and clean people up and make them better than they seem, because you're right,
Yeah.
all of the people in it are terrible, just as we are, like it's a reflection of ourselves. And you do, I mean, we've kind of talked about this already, but you do a lot of excavation throughout the book, and I'm, this is based obviously on what you did during this time, on your own flaws, which is really fascinating because that is hard to do in any relationship. Like, that is not, I don't feel like that's the place that we go, in a marriage or a friendship or whatever the relationship is. especially when the other person has hurt us so terribly. Like, we don't tend to immediately think, what did I do to cause this or to make this worse or whatever? Um, and you, like I said, you've kind of talked about this, but I'm just curious, like, how did you end up in that place where you were willing to do that for yourself? Because you even kind of admit in the book, like, it's not like that's your strong point. It's not a thing that you would typically probably do right away personally. And I'm right there. Like, my tendency is just to blame immediately. So how did you find yourself in that place where you were willing to do that?
So, when something uh, terrible happens to you, when you're betrayed, let me put it that way.
Yeah.
Um, it's so easy and so natural uh, to see red, and you're only thinking about what a terrible thing this other person has done to you. That is the most natural biological, psychological reaction is how dare you,
Yeah.
and to judge. And I know the word judge, like we're all supposed to think like, oh, judging is bad, don't judge, but that's immediately what you do,
Right, for
because it
sure.
is such an epic betrayal, um, and I mean, there are a million kinds of betrayals at work and with your friends and family, but obviously infidelity is probably the greatest in the pantheon of betrayal. And so when it happens, it's so easy to look at the other person and go, "Wow, you are a bad person." And I'm
Mhm.
not saying that's not true, but they take so much of your focus. That takes so much of your focus. Just thinking about how bad somebody must be to do that, and because of how deep the hurt is,
Hmm.
and what that starts to do over time. And I mean, there is such a thing as righteous anger, and there is such a thing as right and wrong and justice, and so it's not
Yeah.
always bad to judge. Of course, you have to judge every day in your life. But what it does, or what it did to me, is it you're because you're the mind is always looking for why. You're always looking for reasons why this happened. And it's very easy when the person says, "Well, I had an affair, and now I want to go be with this person." It's very easy to judge and to hate or come close to hating. Being so shocked by my wife's behavior, and so upset by it, and so focused intensely on, oh wow, so she's a liar, she's deceptive, she's been lying
Mm.
for however many years or months, um, and it was the lying that was, oh, it was so awful to sort of get my head around. What that did is it started to inflate me. It made me, by comparison, it made me feel like a really great person.
Hmm.
Like, gosh, I'm a jerk, but like I would never do that. I mean, and so then it's like Aristotelian comparison just like explodes in your brain. Like, well, she's bad, so I'm good.
Yeah.
She's a liar, so I'm always honest. And you make these comparisons, and they just happen naturally. You're not
Right.
like going on a walk going, I'm gonna go think about how bad my wife is today. It just like it doesn't stop. And so the idea of her became really small and evil and bad, and the idea of myself got really big.
Hmm.
And I was like, I mean, look at me. And of course, everybody you tell, like, when I
Kind of
called my
reinforces
friends,
that probably,
oh, they
right?
totally reinforce. They're just trying to make you
Yeah.
feel better, and they're like,
Yeah.
"Oh gosh, and you're such a good dad, Harrison, and you're so loyal." I mean, everybody, and so it creates in you this absolutely false sense of your own goodness.
Hmm.
And I know that's like, probably seems like philosophy 101 or theology 101. Like, yeah, okay, if you judge others, then you get this false sense of your own goodness or righteousness, whatever. But it happens so intensely and so suddenly. And, there was a moment where this was about a week after I found out about the affair and found out she wanted to leave, and had told. two of my closest friends, one who is an English teacher, and the other who is a therapist. Very lucky that he's a therapist.
Yeah.
And I'm in a band with these guys. They're good friends, very wise. And so my therapist buddy, Jimbo, uh, he said, in situations like this, if it's going to work out, if there's going to be reconciliation, he said, both couples have to own their part in it.
Hmm.
And what he was, and he went on and he's like, you've got to, like, it's very easy for let's just say, have a theoretical couple, Bill and Mary, and Bill has an affair, but they decide to stay married and reconcile. Or it's very easy and obvious what Bill has to do
Right.
to reconcile. He's got
Right.
to deal with
Yeah.
what he did. And it's very easy for Mary to be like, okay, Bill, like,
Are you doing it?
you got to
Yeah.
get clean, buddy.
Yeah.
And what Jimbo was saying was like, no, it's actually like both people have to sort of own how they have to own the quality of marriage that they made together.
Yeah.
And he wasn't saying that I caused the affair, and that's
Yeah.
a very important distinction because
Right.
create a lot of shame. But he was saying like,
you're not trying to assign blame. You're just trying to understand the really complicated network of motivations that exist in any marriage, in any
Right.
committed relationship. And that part is like doing brain surgery where you're trying to remove this nerve and get past this node, and you're just trying to kind of look at whatever. You're almost like taking the clock apart a little bit and seeing what broke.
Yeah.
And so that helped me. Jimbo's advice there, and it's advice I have given to many people since, and would give to all of your listeners, is if your relationship is not going as well as it can, whether it's at the extreme level that ours was, or whether you've just been married for a couple years and you're just kind of both vaguely unhappy, yes, you need therapy. You need to go talk, but you do need to look in the mirror and go, okay, like, I mean, that's what I love about the New Testament, and that's what I love
Yeah.
about Jesus, the weirdo, is like, no matter what's going on, he's like, stop talking about other people. Like, stop.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
the whole beam in your own eye. Like that's what I love
Right.
about it, is that he's like, all right, maybe that person should not be doing that thing over there. Like, I'll handle that. You just need to like chill and like go into a cave and look in the little pocket mirror you keep in your phone and just tell me what you see there. Don't look over there across the street or across the bed. What do you see in
Right.
the mirror? That's what I love
Yeah.
about Christianity, and
Yeah.
that's what I found in it, was this extreme call to like start at home, whatever's going wrong.
Yeah. I mean, I've had similar advice, or my husband and I have had similar advice in our marriage of just realizing like everyone has a part to play. And like you're saying, you still have to own up for when you are at wrong. That doesn't like excuse behavior, but um it's it's very difficult to do, and we fail at it all the time. But I think it's a good mindset to go into marriage, or to, continue your marriage in, is to try to figure that out. I think this is kind of like the flip side. What I loved about the book is that you're not only peeling back the layers um, of your own flaws and how you are in your marriage with Lauren, but you are also offering uh, this look into Lauren and who she is. It's very compassionate, and it's kind of like a slow build for the reader of who she is and what she's gone through. And of course, she has her own chapter in the book as well, which I loved. Um, but that's kind of like it seems like it's both, and it's like realizing who you are and being willing to be honest about your own flaws, but also offering compassion and empathy for a person, for the other person at the same time. And I'm curious what you think about that interplay. Do you feel like that's true? And if so, was there one that was harder for you than the other?
Well, realizing how you suck is very helpful, and being kind to other people who suck. Uh, that's that's the basic gist of it. Is that
Yeah.
like that's how it should go? Which is
Yeah.
like because like I love myself, Kelsey. I think I'm a great guy. I've never been anybody else, so I don't have much to compare it to. But I know all my motivations. Like I know that all those years when I wasn't taking the garbage out, I wasn't thinking, "Oh, baby, I'm not going to take that garbage out so hard." I could not even
Yeah.
enter into my brain. I was thinking about something else that was important, which is
Yeah.
I've got to go make this bread for my family. Um, you're not whatever. So when you recognize your own faults, like, okay, I didn't like, we'll just stick with the garbage. Cause that was something that I definitely did not do for many, many years unless I was asked to. And there are a million reasons I never took the garbage out. But I didn't. And, when you recognize like, okay, even though I wasn't trying to hurt anybody's feelings and I wasn't being nefarious about it, it would be maybe good to take the garbage out sometimes. Maybe I could have seen a little bit like my wife drowning in babies and
Mm.
goldfish and, mac and cheese for the kids and be like, maybe I'll put this work down for 5 minutes and I'll go take the garbage out. Right. So when you recognize this about yourself, then when you're thinking, oh, well, okay, so my wife fell in love with our neighbor. Maybe you didn't start with her deciding she was going to fall in love with our neighbor.
Yeah.
Maybe
Right.
it started with, I just want somebody to talk to, and my husband doesn't seem to want to talk to me. And here's this guy
Mm.
who will.
Yeah.
Like, there's nothing wrong with wanting to talk to like just wanting to talk to another person. And so recognizing that, and we're just talking about garbage, but like recognizing like I could have come up with a list of 1,000 things that are wrong with me. In the book, I just do it A to Z. I think so. That's 26 things that are
It's
wrong with
pretty
me.
comprehensive though.
So, some are very small and totally just funny, and others are
Yeah.
real are big.
Yeah.
But like recognizing that makes it so much easier to go, okay, well, if I am like that and my friends still love me and
Mm.
my mom still likes me and my kids think I'm okay, then uh maybe I can look at what my wife did and maybe I can find a way to not hate who she is now.
Yeah.
And so yeah, you know, having a little sort of understanding and empathy for yourself, empathy meaning like to understand the feeling. If you can have a little empathy for recognition and empathy for yourself, that gives you a lot more for somebody else. So if you really want to forgive, like, I mean, this sounds so stupid. I'm so sorry, Kelsey, but like you really do have to start with yourself and be like,
Hmm.
all right, this is a thing I do that is bad.
Hmm.
And I'm going to ask for forgiveness for this from God and maybe even from myself. I'm going to say
Yeah.
like, thanks, Harrison, for like sticking around. Thanks for all the good stuff that you're doing. It's okay that you are sometimes an asshole and don't take out the garbage and make fun of your friends and whatever. So yeah, it's a strange psychological process of thinking about who you are and then thinking about who other people are and trying to see the best in everybody, including yourself.
Yeah. Would you say, what has forgiveness practically looks like for you and Lauren as you like continue to walk through this? Because I think there's so many misconceptions these days about what forgiveness is, and there probably always has been, but I think we tend to go to extremes with forgiveness, and this kind of goes into what you write about, and this is kind of a larger theme I feel like in the book about justice and mercy, but yeah, just curious what that has looked like for you guys as you've walked through this, through the book writing, and then even now.
Yeah. It's so hard. Forgiveness is so hard.
Yeah.
As I say in the book, it was very easy to forgive Chad. That was her boyfriend for a long time. Because I don't see that guy every day. I haven't
Yeah.
seen him in years, and I probably will never see him again. So it's very easy to forgive that kind of person. um, uh, Forgiving somebody who is in your house that you see every day is much more difficult, because you're getting new reasons to not forgive them every
Yeah.
day because
Right.
people are stupid and do selfish things. And the same for her to me. So, what does that look like on a practical level? That's a great question. Um, I think for me, when I sense any resentment, I have a very fertile heart for resentment. Um, I'm sure other people do too, but it grows quickly. It's like a greenhouse of resentment. Um, and so whenever I feel it growing, I try to talk about it. Like I don't, because if you don't talk about it, that's like keeping the greenhouse closed, and it just grows and grows and grows. And when I say talk about it, I'm talking about in therapy, with your close friends, your support network. I know the phrase support network may be strange for some of the men listening, but if you don't have one of those, you will pay for it,
Yeah.
in loss and heartbreak and loneliness.
Yeah.
Um, so, so talking about it with your therapist, with your friends, and with your partner. And so, if I'm not having, if I'm having, let's just say, well, I'll give you an example that's very recent. So, some of the events of the book, some of the biggest ones happened in the fall. And
Hmm.
so whenever the weather turns nice and down in Savannah, when it gets nice and cool in the fall, or kind of cool,
Yeah.
I immediately have like weird, like body triggering,
Hmm.
where I'm like, my brain knows something isn't right. And so like, this was like a couple of weeks ago. I was like, oh yeah. I was like, I mean, it's beautiful weather. I love college football. I love the fall. I've always loved the fall. Most people in the South do, because it's when our weather turns tolerable. And but then I was like, why am I? I was just kind of in a funk, and I was like,
Hmm.
I think I'm in a funk right now because this is reminding me about some really really bad things that happened in my marriage. And that's not, I'm sure I was in a funk for a bunch of other reasons too, but that happened and it was hard to ignore. And if I had not talked to Lauren about that, it would have grown from just this little seed of like kind of anger and memory and resentment. I'll just say memory, just a little
Yeah.
seed of memory, into a flower that starts to become bitter and resentful. And I can't believe she did this to me. And she did this to me. And now every time the weather turns nice, I'm going to be in a bad mood. Like, how awful is that? I used to love
Yeah.
fall.
Yeah.
Like it spirals out of control. This is just one
Right.
little example. And then, so I told her, I'm just in a funk, and I think this is why. And, wasn't a fight or anything. I just said something like, we've had some tough falls in the
Hmm.
last few years. And I just think I'm remembering that. So sometimes it kind of sucks. Like just saying that, I think makes her, so that's automatically like fresh air. That's good. That feels
Yeah.
right. It feels
Right.
honest. I don't have to be fake, because when you have that little resentment, then the fakeness starts to really make you feel, it like fuels the resentment, because then you're mad about having to be
Yeah.
fake. You're mad. It's
Right.
so, like, the human mind is so layered and strange and complex. And but also telling her, now when I tell her, she has a couple of options at that point. She can get mad, right? Like,
Right.
geez, it's bringing this up again. Oh my lord! So she has got to make space to be like, oh yeah, that did happen like 3 years ago.
Hmm.
Um, so like like that's totally normal that he's feeling weird about that.
Yeah.
It'll also, I think, might make her more maybe a little kinder or gentler with me for the next couple of days.
Hmm.
There's so many benefits to just like airing it out. So that's one little piece of forgiveness of like when you feel the resentment, it's been like, no, that is not good. I'm gonna open up the doors here. I'm gonna pull it out, share it with somebody, and so that's just one little piece of it.
Yeah.
Um, I think, I mean, therapy is another really huge aspect of forgiveness, because what therapy lets you do, whether you're in therapy alone or with your partner, is it gives you this like really safe place where you can bring up all the stuff you want to bring up when you fight, but you can't.
Hmm.
Because it's going to be less easy to fight in front of a paid professional who seems really nice. Um, there's something
Right.
about that magic with therapy that helps with that. And I think just being able to say, this bothers me, like, I don't know. You also have to disentangle, one thing Lawrence said in the book, which is really funny, is it was really hard to decide what to eat for dinner after this happened, because it's like, I'm like, well, I want pizza. And she's like, I want tacos. And I'm like, well, you had an affair, so I think we get to have pizza. Like as silly as that is how the human mind works. You're
Right.
thinking like, no, 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 no. You don't get to pick tacos. No, no,
Yeah.
no. Or
Not
you don't like,
tonight.
or whether it's like, or it's any decision like deciding where to live. If you're moving and you're in the market for a house, like who wins? Like she wants this house, he wants this house. Well, he had an affair, so I think she gets to pick the house. Like
Yeah.
the human mind really does work at that level kind of unconsciously. And
Hmm.
so realizing that you need time to disentangle, like, no, 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 like this has nothing to do with the affair. This is just she wants tacos. Like
Yeah.
it's not a weapon. Like don't use this as a weapon.
Right.
Don't weaponize your pain, I guess maybe
Yeah.
is the point there. And so
Yeah.
they're just constantly sort of fighting the human urge to punish and win. It's
Right.
constantly fighting that.
Yeah. That's so interesting because, one of the definitions that you hear a lot for forgiveness is that it's forgetting. And I think that's true theologically in the sense of how we think of God forgiving. But I think for us, it is so much more complicated because we're not God, and we're still sinful, and we're still dealing with all of our stuff. And I love that you kind of pointed out that there is a benefit, especially in this aspect of resentment, where you you need to bring it up. You can't just push it aside and pretend like it's not there. But then there's also that there is a level of forgetfulness in the sense where you're not allowing things to become a weapon, and you're not allowing everything to revolve around the event. That
Yeah.
is the only way to heal. So there's a little bit of both there. I think that is hopefully helpful for people. And then of course I think another thing is time, and knowing that this takes so much time, and we're so quick to, I don't know, I feel like we're so quick to just rush things and want a resolution immediately, whether it's in mercy or judgment, or uh, in grace. And sometimes we just need more time than we're going to allow ourselves.
I think in a marriage, especially, you have to talk, and
Yeah.
it's hard. Whether it's kids or work, or you're just tired, or if you've been married for 21 plus years, like Lauren and I have, you kind of run out of things to talk about. I mean, she's heard all my stories. I've heard all of her
Yeah.
stories. Unless
Yeah.
something cool happened today at work, like she's like we've heard all the stories, and so
Hmm.
talking can be really difficult. That's one of the great things about therapy, is that it's makes talking so much easier. The point is that if you can stay in touch, if you can find moments, uh, I'm not going to use the phrase date night, which just like two of the worst words in the two really cool words, Kelsi, that when put together are just awful. I love dates and I love nights, but I do not love date nights. Too much. It's like too much pressure to be like
You don't
in
have a shirt that
love.
says hubby, or Lauren doesn't have a shirt that says something about hubby. I
Oh
can't,
my
I don't,
gosh.
I feel like that is just right up your alley.
I would divorce her in a minute. Um, but like we were but like it is good to have moments, whether like it's you're going on a walk or or for us, like the weather's so beautiful right now. I do a lot of my writing outside. I'll be sitting outside. She'll come out, sit on the tailgate, and we'll just kind of sit there for a few minutes and talk. Like that's so useful for forgiveness, for the own sort of own.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking about like forgiveness of some like terrible marital crime, but just the daily
Yeah.
forgivenesses that you have to do in a marriage. Like just whether it's in therapy or at some god awful date night or when you're just hanging out. On the tailgate or whether you're watching Netflix in bed and you're just chatting, like it's so important to just, if you keep those lines of communication open to be like, I'm having a terrible day or I'm having a terrible week right now and I don't know what to do. Um, and it might not have anything to do with you, my
Right.
spouse, but
Right.
just like that, just there's so much air and light and water that can get into the heart.
Mm.
To reverse the soil metaphor from the bad things, you do need good things to grow in your heart, and to keep those, to let those things grow, you do need a lot of sun and air and light, and that just means talking, communicating, hearing, listening, nonverbal communication, like keeping all those pathways sort of clear, like in cleaning the leaves out of the gutter. And you have to do that in your marriage constantly. And if you're not
Yeah.
doing it, if you're not doing it, then they're doing it for you, and they're
Hmm.
probably going to resent you for it, or it's not getting done, and your marriage is either going to die and you won't even know it, or it'll
Hmm.
die and you will know it. So
Yeah.
it's not really about forgiveness so much as just keeping those drains clear, so things can run through them. So
Yeah.
good feelings and happiness and truth and authenticity and good sadness can all run through them. So clean out the drains.
Clean out the drains. I love it. I want to ask you one more question. I know we're ending our time, but you say in the book, if you want your marriage to survive, you need people in your life who believe in the idea of it. And that's I think that's one of my favorite takeaways from the book. It's also probably one of the simplest ones. Like it seems almost obvious, but I don't I don't know if it is. I don't know if it is for a lot of people. And you write a lot about your community during this time and kind of what they did for y'all and um, how they played a role in you and Lauren staying married. Can you talk to us a little bit briefly about what that looks like from your church and your friends and why that was important?
Well, it definitely it takes more than two people to be married,
Yeah.
and because no marriage can live long in isolation. I mean, I don't know. Maybe in the frontier days they could, Little House on the Prairie, by necessity, but generally in a perfect or in an ideal scenario, a marriage has this whole support network around it.
Yeah.
Um, of friends. And sometimes those friends come in the form of church. Sometimes they come in the form of a kickball team. As I say in the book, what churches do so well, whether regardless of how you feel about God or organized religion, but what churches do so well is create. They create it's a network. It's just this
Yeah.
massive network of help that people need to survive. And that obviously a church does lots of things, not just sort of helps the people who are in it. They help people who aren't in it too, um, but that's what churches do so well. Like, I mean,
Right.
anybody who, belongs to a church knows, like, you might hate everybody in your church, but when you have a baby, they all bring you food for like a
Yeah.
week or a month.
Right.
And nobody complains about, well, that you can complain about the food. We got like Italian food, like 10 meals in a row. We were like, no more lasagna, please. Your chicken spaghetti is a bad idea. Do not do that. Um, but but yes, you need people to lean on, and what that means is you need somebody who, when the fit hits the shan, or even when you're just in a funk, you don't always have to talk to your spouse about it. I mean, geez, if I talked to my wife every time I was feeling down about something in my life or my marriage, uh, like she would be very resentful of me and get very frustrated with me because I'd just be such a downer all the time.
Hmm.
So having friends, like I can just text my buddies and be like, let's go get a beer. I'm having a really shitty week. You can bleep that if you want, or at like sitting with one of my buddies just to work through like a work problem, like a career question. Like putting all that always on your spouse is
Right.
abuse. That's abuse, man.
It's
Like,
too much.
leave, like, eventually, like I used to ask Lauren about my writing ideas, which was like torture. I mean, I'd come home from the coffee shop and I'd be like, I was thinking it would be like a book about an armadillo, and he talks. It's a talking armadillo, and she's like she's nursing a baby at each teat. She's like stirring oatmeal. I'm like, what do you think? Why aren't you listening to my armadillo idea? And then realize like my best friend from high school, a guy named Mark, he loves to talk about stories. And I was like, you know what? I think I'm just going to talk to Mark about my stories because he loves those kind of conversations. And I won't subject my wife to those because I love her and I don't want to hurt her by
Yeah.
subjecting her to armadillo pitches. And so, and then every now and then, if like I told her yesterday, I was like, I think I've made a breakthrough with this story I'm working on. And she goes, good. And that was it. And it was, you could see in her eyes, she was saying, I don't want to know. I don't want to know what it is unless it's going to make us $1 million. And then you can tell me. And like just recognizing like, so this is an important part of having community, not just like when
Yeah.
your marriage goes into the dumpster fire, but just on a daily basis, you need all these other people. We kind of stumbled into this church in 2017, 2018, this new church, very small church plant called Christ the King. It was a church plant. It's not a church plant anymore. But all we had in common were we were kind of uh, the handful of families, especially the men I was friends with, were all kind of romantics, kind of dreamers, but also kind of like hadn't quite found our people yet, and
Hmm.
we're all kind of searching. And a very mixed group, like a total, like it started with basically you could say really four families. Um, uh, the pastor, Soren and Emma. Um, Jimbo, that therapist I was telling you about, and his wife, Lindsay, another couple, Brad and Meredith, and then Lauren and me. And there were others, but we were kind of the core group of it. And I cannot describe how it happened, but I think we all just realized we needed people.
Yeah.
And so we, because it was a small group, we hung out a lot. We drank beers on each other's porches a lot. We went to the St. Patrick's Day parade together. Whenever there's a good football game on, we would watch it together. And I was sitting there, the thing is, I get up really early to write. I get up at like 4 or 5 every morning, and
Mm.
which makes it really hard to stay out late watching football games with your friends. And so Jimbo would always be texting me like, "Hey man, it's midnight and I'm in front of your house with a bottle of liquor. Like, come outside, let's have a drink." And I'm like, because Jimbo is a night owl, and I'd have to say no constantly. I'm like, dude, I can't. I gotta sleep because I gotta get
Yeah.
up and work. And I learned, but I looked and I realized I was like, if I keep saying no to Jimbo, he's not gonna be my friend anymore. And I really love this guy, so I would be like, okay, I'd like if I got to a good stopping place with a story, I'd be like, okay, Jimbo, let's do something tonight. I can sleep in this one time because I know you love to hang out late at night. And then he'd be like, awesome. And we would go do something. And I looked up one day and I realized, like, I was like, oh, I think I have friends now, like adult male friends.
Yeah.
And it was such a strange feeling to be like, I have guys. That's so weird. Like, I'm 48 now. And to be like basically have two jobs at a university and as a writer, and to have three kids
Mhm.
and a wife and so much to do. Was really awesome to look up and realize I had friends. And God be praised that I did, because when the fit hit the shan in my marriage, I leaned really hard on these guys.
Hmm.
And it would have been really difficult to lean hard on people who I hadn't already formed strong friendships with.
Yeah, for sure.
I had already shown these guys. I mean, I play the drums in church, and that is really weird to me that I am the church drummer. I did not see that one coming. Um, but like like in this one example for Soren, like I had been his church drummer for 3 years, never missed a Sunday. I mean, Kelsi, I used to miss Sundays all the time. I hated
Yeah.
church. But I played church. I was there every Sunday. I was always there, whether I was in a bad mood or not. I was always there. I was always good on the drums, nice and tight, helped the band sound good. And so, it was, when I called Soren, I mean, Soren basically like had to talk to me or Lauren every day for hours for like
Mm.
months at a time. It was like a
Yeah.
part-time job for him. But
Yeah.
because I had shown up, I'd always been there. I'd shown up, and he knew I was not messing around with our friendship, that
Mhm.
was real, and it invested him in us, and his friendship alone was enough to have saved us.
Hmm.
What he did for us, physically and emotionally and verbally, the advice and counsel and the listening. So yeah, that's a long rambling way of saying, like, you really have to you have to start building that structure around you and your family. Now start
Yeah.
now, like find male friends. They don't have to go to your church, they don't have to go to your temple, they don't you don't I mean, they can be guys from work, they can be guys from the
Right.
bowling alley, but you've got to find them.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I talk a lot about, I feel like evangelical Christianity pushes this like relationship thing kind of too far sometimes. Like it's like get in a small group and make your best friends, and if you don't, then you're in trouble, and it gives people some anxiety. So I've tended to try to encourage people and have felt very refreshed knowing like church isn't always community. It's not always going to be like your solid people around you, but at the same time, you do need that. Like you need it whether it's in church, and if it is in church, great. Like that's amazing. You can give Thanksgivings for that and be so thankful for that. But at some point you just need friends, whether like you're saying they are a part of your, we're talking specifically about Christians here, but whether they're part of your church community or not, finding that support is really, really helpful. So I appreciate you talking a little bit more about that. I don't want to take any more of your time. I'm so thankful for the time that you've given me, and so thankful that you've written this book.
It's
Thank you
so
to
good.
you. Thank you to you and Lauren for opening up and being willing to share, because this is something I think so, what regardless of what degree they feel this type of stuff in their marriage, and it's not talked about. So really grateful that you guys were willing to share it and be honest about it.
Thank you. I've never had so many people tell me I was brave. I was like, I didn't like it was cool at first, and then it was like, oh crap, it has scared me to death, people telling me how brave that I am. It has definitely been weird to have a book this personal. I mean, I've written
Yeah.
about myself and about my life for a long, long time, and have published two other essentially memoirs,
Right.
which were good practice and good rehearsal for this. I thought
Hmm.
those were brutal and honest, but those were just a prelude to the brutality of this last book. So yeah, it's definitely messes with your head a little bit when everybody's like, it felt natural to me. I write about my life, and this experience blew my mind, and so I thought I should tell others about it. When you see a miracle, you want to tell people
Yeah.
what you saw. But so many people are like, so brave. And I'm like, brave? I'm brave. And then I'm like, I'm scared to death. Like, I wish I was brave. Now I'm scared because everybody's saying I was brave. Well, how was I brave? So anyway, you're very kind to say that. I appreciate it.
Outside Ourselves is a 1517 show. To view all of our shows and all of our podcasts, please go to 1517.org/podcasts. New things that are coming up. When this show airs, we are at the very beginning of Advent season. 1517 has a lot of amazing Advent resources over at our website, and actually a completely free new resource entitled The Clothing of the King, which you can get and download for free. There's resources in there for both pastors, churches, and individuals, so I encourage you to check that out if you haven't already. You can find those by going to our website and searching for The Clothing of the King. It should be pretty easy to find. If you like today's episode, I would love if you could give us a 5-star review wherever you're listening, and if you are listening and watching on YouTube, please subscribe below so you are sure to not miss out on any future content. If you have a question or a comment, feel free to leave that in the comment section as well, and I'll do my best to get back to you as quickly as possible. Thanks as always for listening. See you back here in a couple of weeks.